Hi. Do you ever look at your life and even though it's a perfectly fine life, you wonder whether this is the life you're supposed to be living? Like, it's a great life on paper and you've done everything right, you've done what everybody else was expecting you to do. So you went to school, maybe you studied something, you got a job, maybe you managed to have a flat and live on your own, you have people around you. So, according to popular knowledge, that's the recipe for success, the recipe for happiness, right? But you look at it and you're like, this can't be it. Like, there is something missing. And what's tricky about that is that it's not a fact. It's not something that happens to you one day where you can decide to react and do something about it. But it's a growing feeling. And if you're like me, you also kind of test your tolerance. You try to see where your limits are. And that's why it's so hard to actually pinpoint it and act on it. But if it sticks around for long enough, then at some point you're going to start wondering how much of this life did I actually choose and how much of it did just happen to me. And I call this feeling the mismatch. That's the feeling of living a life that happened to you, but that you didn't choose. And so I was wondering about the origin of that feeling for me. And I think in my case, it mostly started when I finished studying and I got my first job. Because until then, life had a clear path for you. You had clear milestones because you were going to school, then you studied, you got your first internship, the second, the third in my case, and then your first job, your first full-time pay. Maybe with that you manage to get a flat on your own. So you have all these milestones that you can follow and that give you this feeling of following the right path. And then once you are a full-time employee, you've arrived in the adult life. And if you look at it, it's a little bit like a 40-year void where you're gonna work until retirement, and it's up to you to structure the way, right? It's not like when you grew up where everything was laid out. And so I got my first job, and then I realized after a couple of years that, if I didn't do anything, if I was not proactive about it, potentially I could stay 15 years in the same job. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I knew deep down that this would kind of be torture for me. I knew it because I noticed after 2, 3 years at the same job, same dynamics, same challenges, that I was getting curious about other experiences, other places, other companies, and so on. And so I changed jobs a few times. Actually, I had 6 jobs in 10 years, always voluntarily or because I was working at startups that shut down. And even after all these changes, I still have the feeling of stagnation. So I was looking at my life and I was like, a lot happened, but actually I feel like I'm stagnating. And then I started wondering, how is my life gonna look like in the next 5 years, 10 years? And this is where I realized that if I don't do anything about it, if I'm not being proactive about it, then my life in 5 years is gonna look the same as of today. And I know that because my life today looks fundamentally the same as 5 years ago. And so at first I thought this feeling of a mismatch was coming from the job, was coming from a feeling of boredom. But at the same time, I realized that changing jobs didn't fundamentally change anything about it. So in the end, it wasn't really about the job, right? And so again, I started to try to understand, when did I not feel like this? Like, when do I feel alive, optimistic, motivated, engaged? And I realized all this happens every time I work on something of my own. For example, in the past, I loved creating online stores. And I was building them from zero, doing the branding, the design, selecting the products, and I really enjoy that. And these last few months, for example, I started learning how to build mobile apps. I'm not a designer, I'm not a software engineer, but when I'm actually building mobile apps for myself, solving my own problems, I really feel alive. I really feel motivated. I feel proud of myself. I feel also optimistic. And so I realized that's basically when I'm creating that I really feel good about life. And so I think that's where I also saw the irony, because then I was comparing these moments where I felt super alive and super proud of myself with the rest of the time where I'm like, there's something missing. And then I realized that the irony is that most of our lives, and mine as well, are revolving around consumption. We are consumers. Like we consume stuff that already exists, right? We consume jobs, for example. They already exist, they are on the market, and we take them. We obviously consume products, services, experiences, opinions as well. And that's really like the system we live in. And I think it takes a little bit of time to realize because when you start working, for example, you have your first salary. Of course, you're gonna enjoy consuming, you're gonna enjoy having stuff that you couldn't have before. But after some time in life, you realize that you've basically managed to consume or get a lot of things, and that your happiness level maybe is the same or has not changed much. And that's where I am in life, like I'm 36 and I'm realizing consuming more is not really making any difference, but producing more, creating, being like a maker, that's really what fulfills me. And this is where the irony is, because we always think that when we have this feeling that our life is missing something, then we also think that we need to get something. We need to have something new into our life so that we can kind of restore the balance. But I believe that if you miss something in life, then maybe giving, producing, creating might be the solution. At least I feel like it is for me. And of course, social media is not really helping because what's glorified there is mostly consumption, right? Lifestyles, holidays, trips, cars, new flat, and so on. So it's a lot around consuming things. And it's fine, but I know that this is not what I'm expecting from life. All right, so a lot of talking, but what am I gonna do about it? Well, I don't have a solution yet, and I also don't think that there is a solution. What I know is that I'm not gonna quit my job tomorrow because my job is not the essence of the problem. It's also not about becoming a minimalist rebel that's gonna live in the woods, even though I have to be honest, I binge watched van life videos this weekend. No, I think it's mostly about being more conscious about how you live your life. And for me, I know that I want to be a maker, I want to create more. And that's exactly why I decided to produce this video, put it out there, and see if it resonates with people. So if you know what I'm talking about, if you know what the mismatch is for you, then please let me know and comment. I would love to hear about how it looks like for you, how it feels like for you, and if you've already managed to find some kind of solutions. So yeah, I guess on this channel I'll be documenting my way of figuring things out. And if you feel like you want to be part of the journey, then welcome. My name is Gauthier. I'm super happy that you're here, and I'll see you soon.